All right, thank you so much for staying with us. You're still on Business Nigeria. Global energy research body Wood Mackenzie has said Brent crude prices will average $73 per barrel this year, about $2 below Nigeria's ambitious $75 per barrel projection in 2025. Budget that's which faces serious issues, of course, around revenue. Considering various geopolitical and economic factors, including potential peace talks between Russia and United States regarding Russian-Ukraine conflict, lesser ongoing tariffs and sanctions against Iran, the market outlook anticipates global oil demand to increase by 1.2 million barrels per day in 2025. Nigeria targets to increase oil production to 2.06 million barrels per day in 2025 as the country banks on oil and gas to finance its 54.9 trillion naira budget. Let's talk to Dr. Chinan Dikwal. He is the Vice Chair, Africa Energy Council. He joins me live from Qatar to continue this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Dikwal. It's good to have you on the show.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I think we should start with expectations. A lot is happening around the oil market with projections and reprojections saying there could be a drop in production and all of that. But let me ask you what you think as we wait for March's report from OPEC. Let's review what we saw in February and what's your expectation moving forward, considering all of these geopolitical issues affecting the market.
Thanks so much, So I think there are a couple of things that we need to bear in mind as Nigerians. So the first of those here is this, that we have a new sheriff in town, Donald Trump. He has a new agenda, drill, baby drill. So in lots of ways, he's very positive for us as Nigeria because we're an oil-producing state. So that's really positive on that front. But we need to recognize as well that with all of this agenda that's going on, we have a budget to finance. You just talked about it, 54 trillion naira budget that we have to finance. And there are a couple of things that are really important. One, McKinsey is forecasting $73 per barrel for this year. Quite frankly, I align with that. I see that to happen. And the reason for that is this. One, Donald Trump last week literally just put that sanction on Iran. So about 30 vessels in Iran have come under sanction. 30 vessels that take crude oil from the fields onto the market. So that, of course, means that demand for crude oil is going to go down because that supply is constrained. But the reality of it here is, you just spoke about it, Tolu, that there are negotiations right now to end the Russia-Ukraine war. And if that ends, the price pressure on crude oil will be lifted. We potentially will see the oil price come down. But outside of that, we're also seeing that China, who's traditionally been the biggest player on the field that takes lots of crude, we've seen a bit of sluggishness in that economy. So I think overall for this year, a very smart finance minister like we have, Wale Edun, will start to think, what's the price point for me to peg my budget? Last year, we saw $77 per barrel was sort of his peg. I'm hoping that this year he'll be much smarter than that and go a little bit lower, because all of the signs are pointing to the fact that we will be around $73, $74, $75 per barrel this year.
A good start. And when we talk about meeting up with our budgetary projections, we look at Nigeria trying to hit 2.06 million barrels per day. The minister said this is possible. Private sector players say this is possible. Operators are saying this is possible, that we can meet this up. But considering all theft and vandalism, do you think that we will get there? There's a renewed vigor and fight towards, addressing this. What is your assessment with regards to that?
Question, Tolu. So I'm going to say this, right? I'll take us back to January 2022. January 2022, our crude oil production was about 1.1 million barrels per day. Now, for context, Nigeria in the past used to produce about, roughly would produce about 1.8 million barrels per day. So that was a given. That was sort of our production level. But in 2022 January, we're still low at 1.1. Now, I'm going to say this. In the last OPEC count, so in February of this year, January, we were producing 1.5 million barrels per day. So that's about a 30% increase from where we were before. This is absolutely incredible. And why is it incredible? Because that's our OPEC quota. So Tolu, just to say this, OPEC has traditionally given us a quota that we've not been able to satisfy for a long time. For the very first time ever, we are at that quota, which is really, really exciting news. So the question will be, can Nigeria produce above that quota? You just mentioned 2.06 million barrels per day, which I think is incredibly possible. But there are a couple of things that have to happen before we'll produce to that level. One, we need to have a discussion with OPEC. And then number two, we need to look at our system internally. How do we fortify and make sure that the theft that's happening does not continue? And actually, I'll say this to you. So one of the estimates that we've done not too long ago, we estimated that every day, so bear in mind, Nigeria produces, say for the sake of argument, 1.5 million barrels per day. Every day in 2018, about 200,000 barrels was being stolen. This is a fact. It's not even in question. About 200,000 barrels was being stolen. Today, I think at the end of 2024, actually, the same analysis was done, and that number went down from about 200,000 barrels per day to about 20,000 barrels per day. So there's been effectively around 90% decrease. And what's happened is all of the things that we've seen, Operation Desert Sanity that's happening in the Delta. The Navy have come up with very inventive ways of fighting and combating oil theft, and it's really worked. Several vessels have been destroyed. In fact, I'm going to say this. Let me just put these numbers out for context. So I think in the last few months, just for context, the Navy found and destroyed about 677 pipelines, illegal pipeline connections. They found over 4,000 refineries, illegal refineries that they destroyed. 4,000 illegal refineries were found and destroyed. And I think even pipeline connections, about 1,800 illegal pipeline connections, vessels, so new vessels coming into Nigeria to come and steal crude, close to 2,000 vessels. All of these things are extremely positive. In the last few years, we didn't see that before. But I'll say in the last 18 months, Operation Desert Sanity 1 and Desert Sanity 2 has really upped the game. And just last week, actually, the special assistant to the president, Olubahejan, was speaking about these things, and she threw out some of these statistics. But I think, without a doubt, it's extremely positive that we are going the right direction. Crude oil production has gone 30% higher than we had before, and we're seeing a lot of gains in the fight towards curbing oil theft. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. But let me build on that. Brilliant answer, of course. Let me build on it and ask you that the issue of local refining now comes to bear. Many talk about local refining as the way to address some of these challenges that we face in Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Now, at the present level, we see what's happening with Dangote refinery. We see what's happening with the NNPC refineries and all of them coming on stream. What impact do you think this would have in the larger oil market?
So when I look at that, when I think about oil refining, I look at it a bit philosophically. I think this is the first time, quite frankly, that Nigeria is backward integrating into its competitive advantage. What I mean by that is, in Africa, we're number one for oil production, for LNG exports and many things, okay? But this is the very first time that we are looking at what we're producing, and instead of just sending straight onto international markets, we're looking at adding additional value into it and then selling that product onto the international market. It is beyond exciting. It is beyond exciting. And just for context, Dangote Refinery, this is about maybe 2 months ago, it is now operating at capacity, 650,000 barrels per day. So think about what we're doing. In Nigeria, we produce roughly 1.5 million barrels per day. Dangote is taking about 650, roughly, for the sake of argument. I mean, you can argue there's a bit of importation, but 650,000 barrels per day capacity. So this is extremely positive because of one, job creation, but the value that we're adding here, the taxes that will be paid, energy security, petrol security, and all of. So it's extremely exciting. And I'd say this actually, that Tolu, just last month, we had the chairman of Hares Holding, Mr. Tony Elumelu, coming out to make the same pronouncement.
Yeah.
Hares Holdings very likely would go into oil refining again. Dangote has de-risked. He's just de-risked that sector, and many players are coming in. Another very good news, I'd say, we just saw again the announcement by Owando. Owando is taking potentially taking positions in Trinidad and Tobago, bidding for refining there. So overall, this is extremely positive because it brings in, additional foreign exchange into the economy.
Now, the flip-flop with regards to prices now, we see an increase, we see a decrease. That's what's been happening in Nigeria. At the time, it was over 1,000 naira. It came down to as much as 900. In some cases now, some filling stations are selling at 860 naira, 865 naira, and all of that. But thanks to deregulation. But many would also tell you that by the time the price of crude shoots up, for example, to about $80 per barrel, it would definitely reflect at our pumps. What happens at that time? So we'll continue to, take it away, take it away. What do you make of that?
No, you're 100% right. So there is still two things. One is Dangote today is functional simply because of the deregulation of the downstream oil and gas industry. In the past, because of subsidy, it was a very opaque system and it was very difficult for true investment capital to come in and invest in the sector. Now he has come in, and because of deregulation, we're having pumps. So we have energy security, energy access. We do have that right now. But you're 100% right, Tolu. If the price of oil goes up to $80 per barrel, unlikely for this year, I'd say, very unlikely for this year, but certainly if it goes to $80 per barrel, there's no question that that pain will be passed on to anyone at the pump. Nigerians will feel the pain. Why is that the case? Because the market is being deregulated. The market is a free market right now. It's a game of demand and supply. It's a game of demand and supply, and therefore the price point. So because of that, we will feel the pain. There's no question about that. But I think the whole thing around energy access and do we have it, I think a lot of that would fade away. It's principally something that happens with deregulation. But I'll say this just very quickly. Nigeria is not unique in doing what it's doing. For a long time, what we were paying here was way cheaper than anywhere else in the world. Even if you look around West Africa, I mean, you know this so well. Ghana, the price of petrol, I think in Ghana, I can't remember now, but I think it's something around $1 per liter at the time. Nigeria is far, far, far less than that. Very significant. I think around 40% off from what it was in Ghana. The same for Niger. And our neighbors had much higher prices, and that was why we had the issues that we had. Crude oil comes in here, of course, just pure capitalist. Once it comes in, you're looking at where you can sell it to get higher amounts of money. So there's lots of smuggling abroad. Today, there's none of that because there's price parity across the border. What you have here and what's across the border is about the same. So there's no incentive for people to take that and sell it abroad. So I think without a doubt, it's an extremely positive thing. We have to understand that because we're now governed by free market forces, when the price of oil goes up, it will be passed to us. There's no doubt about that. But the positive thing about it for this year, I've got to say, Donald Trump is running the drill, baby drill policy. What that means, Tolu, here is that it's very likely that the US will put additional barrels onto the market this year, potentially 2 million barrels, maybe 3 million barrels onto the market this year, okay? Because the policies are very favorable, and ultimately that means that there'll be a lot more drilling acreage and production that's coming online. If that happens, the market potentially will be oversupplied. And that's the whole point around that $73, $74, $75 per barrel for this year. So to your point, I think we should expect a bit of stability. No question about that.
All right, a minute now. We are going to continue our conversation. We have some live pictures from the Lagos House of Assembly where we heard that lawmakers have convened, and the Speaker, Mojisola Miranda, is also there with them. And we'll be having live pictures from there and see what the proceedings will be looking like today. We all know what's been happening, the back and forth with regards to Lagos State Assembly, House of Assembly. So we have live pictures there, and we'll be showing you that. We'll continue with Business Nigeria and all other platforms. Conversation continues with Dr. Dikwal. All right, then, back to our conversation now. It's really getting very interesting looking at this market. Now, let's look at gas. Government is really looking at gas, even talking about projections for this budget. They are thinking of so much funding from gas. What do you also make of our plans to expand revenue from the gas space? Do you think that Nigeria is really set to take advantage of the opportunities in that space?
So I think a couple of things to say there. The first thing, Tolu, is we are the highest oil producer in Africa. There's no doubt about that. But I'll say this, the Niger Delta Basin is actually a gas basin. It's actually a gas terrain. It's not even oil. It's not even an oil terrain. So oil is just as spoils of what we've been getting because of exploration. There's more gas in the Niger Delta Basin than there is oil. Okay, so we haven't even started to fully exploit the gas that there is. But I'll say this very quickly. All the projections, if you look at all the projections that people have from today all up to 2050 or 2030, all of the projections show that gas is going to increase significantly, 60, 70% increase in global gas demand. Some asset classes will decline. Some forecasts say oil will decline a little bit. Some say coal will go away and all of that. But gas consistently is being seen as that area that will grow very significantly. Now, it's great news for Nigeria because we have a very significant amount of gas. Today in the Niger Delta, if you see any company that's operating today and they are drilling, they're not drilling for gas, they are drilling for oil. In fact, in many instances, if they drill and they find gas, they'll shut it down. They'll shut down the gas and move on and drill for oil. Okay? Gas has not been prioritized. Now we're coming into an area today, we're coming to an administration today that are really prioritizing the exploration and exploitation of gas. A lot of it through LNG, the liquefied natural gas, which is exciting, takes it onto the market. But also, and I think this is what's most exciting, gas for domestic applications in Nigeria, gas for transportation, gas for cooking. And I think that's where the real value is. For any country to industrialize, it has to utilize the resources that it has. And we are blessed with a massive amount of gas. There's no doubt that we have to start to use that gas in the way that we should. So CNG is a very, very welcome approach. There's no question about that. I think the rollout and implementation has been really slow and has not really taken off like we want it to be. When you hear the commentary that people make around comparison between CNG and petrol, the ease and all of that, it hasn't been entirely positive. But I still think that with clever thinking, we can put that strategy back on course and to really make it happen. So to your point, can Nigeria take the lead? There's no question about that. We can take the lead because we have excess gas, we have the technology required, LNG, to take it to market, and that can bring us really, really huge revenues.
Help us with regards to electricity space, because that's where I'm headed now. We need to improve electricity and, of course, also take advantage of renewables. Where do you think we stand with regards to that in Nigeria?
So honestly, if you ask me, so in that regard, yes, no question. I think I look at that two-pronged, and I know the minister, and I know him relatively well. He's doing an incredible job in that regard. But I'll say this. You see, we've tried to use gas in many instances, but there are lots of challenges with it because of security and vandalism and all of that. I think we need to pivot. If you ask me, there needs to be a slight pivot in terms of how we look at the power equation in Nigeria. So without a doubt, for industrial purposes, we have to use gas, we have to use hydro and anything that's base load. So some asset classes are base load. So when you have it 24/7. It's base load. But I think there are lots of instances in Nigeria where solar and renewables, wind in some cases up north and other things, are really critical. In fact, I put this out here. This statistics, everybody knows. There's 600 million Africans who don't have electricity. 600 million. Well, guess what? Over 83 million are in Nigeria. Over 83. So it's a huge number. Nigeria has a massive, massive number of, energy poor people, if you like. So I think, solar energy, which is what we have in abundance with, batteries, it has demonstrated that small off-grid solutions can really play a critical role. I've seen that many times in many places where people will come up with maybe a 10 megawatt or 20 megawatt facility that serves, a community. And that's been a really, really important solution. So I think the future, if you ask me, off-grid solutions, but also centralized gas, CCGTs, combined cycle gas and power, could really serve.
Dr. Chinan Dikwal, Vice Chair, Africa Energy Council, thank you so much for joining the program this Monday afternoon. We appreciate this. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.